just gather yourselves round a bit. Some of you can sit down and some can sit on the table. Now, I just want to look at the blackboard with you first. Thank you for the cards, Sarah, for everybody. Thank you. So if there's no room to sit on the table, just sit on the floor for a minute. I just want us to have a quick talk about this. Because I think yesterday we reached a point where we were asking some pretty important questions. And something struck me that if today we worked on a sort of advisory service to workers, that you know how you felt yesterday, don't you? When the accountant said you have to listen to the money people about the problems of shoemaking as well. And it struck me that we might be able to make a room together where people who were worrying, like the people at Blackley and Broadine yesterday were worrying, could come and get some advice, you know, what we think. There's been a very famous book written called Future Shock. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Well, one of the things the man says in that book is that the people who could teach us a lot are the children. That children have very fresh minds about things. That they haven't had so much pushed into their heads that they've stopped thinking. You know? Because sometimes if you know a lot, it can stop you seeing new ways, can't it? So it struck me that we could say, all right, we'll agree with that book, and we'll say, well, if that man thinks the children could help us think about this problem, we'll see if the children can. Only, of course, you'd be working in two ways, wouldn't you? Because you are children, but you are also workers at Blackley and Broadine. So you know how it feels to be both. Would you agree?
Yes.
So I wrote some of the questions down that I might come to such a room for and try and get some advice on. But they're maybe not the right questions. If you think there are more questions we should add, I'll write them down. Does it help you if I read them aloud, or can you just read them quietly and see the implications? Remember the implications. Read them quietly. Tell me when you've read them all and if you think there should be other questions. You've read them all. Do you think the questions are all right?
Yes. Yes.
Are there any I've forgotten that occur to you that a worker might come and ask if you made a special room? You see, I think probably there's been a lot of books written and they could go to a library. But it's not the same for people to go to a library and try and find a book to answer questions for them, is it? As if they can come in and tap a worker on the shoulder and say, what do you think about this? And get a kind of talking it over thing. Anyway, if you think of any questions, tell me and we'll add them to this, or write them yourself if you think of them. Now, how do you think we could set this room up? I mean, should it be a room where it's like in a big public library where they keep workers working who care to think about these things? You're nodding, some of you. How do you see it then? If I walk in, you know, I'll come to talk about work. What would I see when I came in and you were the people helping?
You should see like a circle of chairs and tables and that in the middle.
There should be a circle of chairs and tables in the middle.
No, like a circle of chairs and tables in the middle of the room.
Yes, and what would be happening there?
And like someone could stand in the middle and put questions forwards and that.
Would you be sitting quietly or would you be busy working? What do you think? Yeah.
Busy working.
Doing your work.
Yes.
So you'll be doing your Blackley and Broadine work.
Yes.
Would it help if some of the workers were doing the work like the very old-fashioned people used to do it?
Yes. Yes.
So some part of that room, there should be workers from, well, how far back would we go, do you think? I mean, do you want to go back to Roman sandal making, or
No.
not as far back as that?
I think as far as the people who have made pottery out of.
As far back as the people you've made the pottery of. Now, I'm not sure what date that works out at, do you?
800 and the map.
Oh, it goes back to where? About 1800. So some part of the room there'd be workers working like the folks of then, and some part of the room obviously there'd be workers working like the folks of now. Do you see any part of the room being workers in the future, or should that be left to... Yeah. Yes. You have made one or two machines which interest me very much, because in a way you've made the very machines in fun, you know, these fun machines about, you know, knock the cow on the head and you get a pair of blue shoes out the other end, which I think is a marvellous idea to think about. You've actually made the machines in fun that yesterday you wouldn't let the accountant fit up in your works, haven't you? Is that how you see the future, or is that just a funny future? A funny one. And yet, you know, as a housewife, when I looked at that, I thought, well, they've got instant heel bars, haven't they? You can take your shoe off and say to the man, mend my shoe. Have you seen those? In some shops. Well, there never used to be cobblers like that, where you could sort of take your shoe off and say, I'll stand with me, you know, with my foot up till you mend me shoe. And I thought, well, it would be rather nice if I could go along with my shopping basket, put my £4.50 in like you've got here, press the button for blue, black, brown or white, and then hold my basket up, and in 10 minutes or whatever time you think this reliable shoe machine makes shoes, have a pair come out at the other end. Can you see any advantage in that?
You wouldn't have to be able, no, because you wouldn't be able to choose what kind of shoe, really.
No, you'd only be able to choose the colour.
You wouldn't be able to test it either, because you would have paid your money. You wouldn't know whether they'd be strong.
Yes, and you wouldn't know if they were strong enough. So we're back to the old thing, you don't think instant shoes, even for once. I mean, do you think we could ever have throwaway shoes? Do you think people could come to find it useful to say, oh, I'll just buy a pair of shoes on the way to work, they'll do for tonight, and then, you know, we can throw them away. They'll look beautiful, they'll look nice, but they won't last, but I can chuck them away tomorrow. You don't think?
I know, but they would still be expensive. They would be wasting money.
Well, I don't know whether they would be expensive. They maybe can make paper look like leather, you see. Of course, it's expensive on trees, I realise that, but leather's expensive on cows, isn't it? And things. They were talking about paper clothes at one time, and I know there are some hotels in America where if you get, you know, where you have to stay a night and you don't have your pyjama and nightie with you, you can actually buy a pair of paper ones or a paper nightie. Sarah doesn't seem to fancy it. But I've never had to do that, but they say they feel quite nice to wear, and you just, you know, you can just sort of pull them apart afterwards. Anyway, can you set this room up with the people who think they want to work like the very early shoemakers that we've made the models of, and those who want to work in now time, and settle it round the way you think it should be, and then we'll see what it's like if somebody comes in and starts questioning for the future. Can you do it without me?
Yes.
Tell you what I'll do then, I'll just stand here and you give me a shout if you need any help. Move anything you need, I'll take the special shoe machine away. I'm beginning to have ideas about this, you know, really. Just get what you need, and I can move these if you want these tables, you know, I can move that for you. You've got to stand up, have you? I think maybe standing up or sitting down depends upon what is the most efficient way of working so that a person could come and get help. Can I just say something? I'm sorry to interrupt you. You're in danger at this moment of making this room feel like school. So be very careful that when you make your bench, it is a cobbler's bench and not a school table. Do you see what I mean? Just in your mind. Don't fall into those traps of sitting down like this is a, you know, we're just going to do some writing work. So only have the chair by the table if that's what you really need in a room where a worker comes and says, excuse me, I'm a bit worried about the future. So think very carefully about that. And if you need more tables, I can clear this for you. Is it possible for me to ask yet who are going to be the very early workers? You're the very early workers, and you're the very early workers, and you're the very early workers. You want to be all the very old-fashioned workers? All right. Well, it doesn't matter because we can have something in the room that suggests Blackley and Broadine, can't we, if we want it? I'll give that a think whilst you set up now. Which of these are you going to deal with? You better just check which questions you feel you could give advice on. Now that I shall have to insist is all dealt with. You know, even as the very old workers, that every one of these questions can be dealt with by you, by somebody in the room. Has anybody got one they think they'd like to deal with in discussion with workers who come in? Which would you like to deal with, Tracy?
What is work?
What is work? So Tracy's going to deal with what is work. I'll make a notice for your back in a minute so that anybody coming in knows if they want to talk about that, it's to Tracy they would come, wouldn't it? What are you dealing with, Sarah?
Why do we work?
Why do we work? And what are you dealing with, John?
Why do we work?
Well then, that's a male point of view and a female point of view. Because they may be different. Sometimes men and women do think a bit differently, don't they, about things?
What is work?
What is work? So you're going to handle what is work as well as Tracy. What about you, ladies? What
Should work be like?
What should work be like? Are you interested in that one as well? What work should be like?
Why do we have to work?
Why do we have to work? Yes. What about any of this? I think this is going to be important here, don't you? And this one, because you've chosen to be past workers. Workers who now we celebrate because they made the shoes of the past and they are now dead and their skills live in the modern people. What were you going to say, Lynn?
What should work be like?
What should work be like? Yes, so Samantha and you are dealing with that. What about you? What do you think you'd like to handle? Some of these questions you may feel are a bit hard at the beginning, in which case we can get on to them later on, you know. Somebody asked that yesterday, why do things have to change? Yes?
Can we learn from the past?
Can we learn from the past? Yes. Can workers now help future workers? Yes. Yes. So you'll handle that. Now when we say we'll handle it, we don't have to be perfect because I don't know how to do this as well, do you? I mean, I can only think about how I might help people. Are there any ones we haven't dealt with?
What is important about change?
Yes, nobody's dealing with that yet. That might be very tricky.
Can change be made good for
And
people?
can change be made good for
Advice to
people?
the future workers?
Yes. Now, is there anybody feels they could take that on and struggle with it? You'd be prepared to. Which would you be prepared to take on, Tracy?
What is important about change?
What is important about change? So you've changed what you're doing now and you're dealing with that one. Grand.
Advice to future workers.
And some advice to future workers. Now, what I'm going to do then is, as I will come round whilst you get on with your work and talking over how you might answer a worker, we'll get labels made for the questions you're prepared to deal with. So that if a strange worker came in, you know, who maybe, they wouldn't just be cobblers, would they, who came in, and shoemakers, they could be anybody. I mean, if I were a shipyard worker, you wouldn't mind helping me with my work worries, would you? All right. Think you're ready to deal with a visitor now?
Yes.
I'll go around to the big double doors over there. Then you'll know that that's where the strangers will always come in. Excuse me, can you ask anybody about things?
Yes.
Thank you. I wonder if you could help me. I've got a problem over. They want to change our shoe factory round, and I see that you're thinking about what's important about change, and I'm very worried about this change because it looks like I'm not going to be able to go on working like I did before. I mean, is change important? They keep saying it's important.
It's important because if you want to do it, you can do it, but if you don't want to do it, you can't really do it, and you can't really enjoy it or nothing like that.
Would your advice be to let them go ahead and change the way I do things?
No, I'd try and stop them.
Would you?
Yeah.
Have you got any advice on how? You see, we tried talk. There was a financial man came, and we talked to him yesterday, but he didn't seem to listen much. He seemed to be telling us, look, it's important to move with the times, he kept saying. You know, move with the times and don't be old-fashioned, he kept saying. But I couldn't see what I could do.
Well, if it was your own shoe factory or your shoe shop or anything like that, you should be allowed to keep it the way you want it to be.
Well, that's what I thought, but they say they keep changing the laws and the rules and that. You know, I don't know who they are. Do you know who changes the rules?
But
Did they change rules when you were working in this old-fashioned shop?
But you were supposed to be what bring machines and everything in this shop now.
Mm.
And then
Are you going to go with the change then?
no, I want it to change.
You didn't want it to change. Well, I'm in exactly the same boat. I don't know how to stop change. You know, I went home last night and as I was making the supper, I thought, well, you know, is it right to resist that man? And then I thought, well, how will I do it if I want to?
Well, like, if you didn't want to work, you just didn't work, and that was that?
The trouble is, you see, with it's the money. I sort of I feel as if I want to work. You know, I've got used to working. I don't know that I'm in a position to say, well, I'm not going to work now.
Well, if you feel you want to work, you should work.
If they'll let you. But as I said, I was saying to some of my mates, I said, well, you know, lasses, if these machines come, we might get, you know, some of us lose our jobs, but I still want to work.
Well, if it was your like factory, that you should let you have on who you want to work with you.
Well, it isn't my factory, but they do say that the man that owns the factory can't afford it. You see, he can't afford to keep on the old ways. So they've been looking for cheaper ways, you see, and that's what they've come up with, this new way.
Well, is someone going to buy that one?
I don't know, I never did get the hang of it, but there was a man in looking at all the money and the wages and what the packaging cost, you know.
Well, if he wanted to change it, he could change it, and then you couldn't do anything about it.
So you think I'd just have to go along with it? Don't look too bright, does it? Oh, and though he did keep saying things could be nicer, like he was talking about paper shoes, you know. But I don't know whether I want to make paper shoes. I don't know. I mean, would you consider it? You wouldn't even think about it? I don't know how it'll be in the future, you see. Do you think there's anything I could do to sort of help the change when it comes, you know?
Well, you could like just go along with it and just get on with your work. It's just like...
So even if I didn't want to make paper shoes, I might find out it was all right to make paper shoes. Is that what some of these people did in their day? Let's see. Well, thank you very much for your attention.